Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into a world where the streets whisper secrets in the fog. The air carries a musky perfume of horse dung and roasted meats, and even royalty walked through grime like everyone else. Picture this: you're entering a medieval city. The stone walls rise high, guarding a patchwork of timbered homes, narrow alleyways, and echoing church bells. It should be romantic, picturesque, but the smell hits you first. It always does. A blend of rot sweat, spoiled ale, and something vaguely sour you can't quite place. You wrinkle your nose. Then you realize that's just the street. You might think you'd be fine, right? Strong stomach, hearty constitution. But you probably wouldn't survive this place. Not without a few parasites, boils, and maybe a case of dysentery. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from and what time it is as you tuck in. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the city gate. The wood groans behind you as it closes. Dust clings to your boots. The echo of your steps swallowed by a clamor of daily life. Horses snore beside overflowing carts. Children dart barefoot through puddles that aren't just water. Someone empties a bucket from a second-story window. You dodge it barely. Welcome to town. In this world, clean is a relative term. Your tunic is stiff from sweat. The air hums with the scent of unwashed bodies. You quickly learn soap is rare and prized like gold. Most people don't bathe more than a few times a year, and even that's generous. You glance down an alley and spot a man scrubbing his feet with sand. Not soap, sand. Historians still argue whether the Middle Ages were truly as filthy as we imagine, or if that's just Victorian slander. But when you're standing here surrounded by chamber pots and compost heaps, it's hard not to believe the hype. You step into the town square. It's lively. Traders call out prices. A juggler tosses knives near the stocks, and the church bell tolls midday. The scent of spiced meat wafts from a nearby stall, making your stomach growl. You approach, only to notice flies thick as fog. The cook waves them off like old friends. You buy a meat pie anyway. Hunger wins. Just don't ask what's inside. Behind you, a man shouts, "Gardes Lou." You instinctively duck. Something splashes near your feet. You don't look back. Still, there's a strange charm to it all. Life here is unfiltered. You see people living without pretense, without Instagram filters or air-freshened foyers. Just sweat labor and the daily prayer that the next fever won't be your last. You pass a woman brushing out her long, tangled hair with a comb that looks more decorative than functional. A cluster of lice drops onto the cobblestones. She doesn't blink. She's got chores to finish. Then there's the tanner's quarter. You smell it long before you arrive. A nose-wrinkling concoction of urine manure and decaying flesh. Tanners soak animal hides in a stew of liquids that would make your modern shampoo bottle cry. You gag just a little and hurry past. The workers laugh. They've stopped noticing years ago. Back in the marketplace, someone is selling perfumed pouches, small sachets of lavender and rosemary meant to hang from belts or tuck into sleeves. People press them to their noses when walking past anything too noxious, which is often. You try one. It doesn't help much, but it's something. Curiously, you start to notice layers of cloth everywhere, not just for fashion, but for function. Scarves and veils cover noses. Gloves are worn not for cold, but to avoid touching, well, anything. People step carefully. The ground itself is a minefield of waste and refuse. A man in a robe passes you clutching a rolled parchment. He's a scholar, you think, by the ink on his fingers. He sneezes violently and wipes his nose with his sleeve. Hygiene, you see, is not yet linked to health. You're reminded that the concept of germs won't exist for hundreds of years. No one here knows that disease travels invisibly on hands in water through the air. Illness is still seen as divine punishment or a bad alignment of the stars. The town physician might carry sweet-smelling herbs in a pouch, convinced they can ward off the bad air. Sometimes they do help. Sometimes it's just luck. Your feet take you toward the river. Ah yes, the lifeblood of the town. It's where people fetch water, wash clothes, dump waste, and sometimes even bathe. You watch a boy splash in the shallows. Upstream, a washerwoman beats garments against the rocks. Downstream, a man empties a night soil cart into the current. You stop watching. The juxtaposition is dizzying. Everything here is layered dirty and beautiful, harsh and poetic. A girl with muddy skirts and a wreath of flowers. A beggar coughing beneath a frescoed wall. Beauty wrapped in grime. A common joke in town goes like this. You can smell the nobility coming, they wear more perfume. It's not far from the truth. The wealthy do bathe more occasionally. But even then, it's a complicated process involving wooden tubs, heated water, and servants. Most prefer to mask body odor with spices and flower oils. The poor, they air out their shirts and hope for rain. You catch a whiff of rosemary and cloves. A merchant walks by his velvet coat stiff with scent. It clings to him like armor. For a moment you almost forget the rot in the gutters. Almost. It's getting dark now. The city slows but doesn't sleep. Torches flicker to life, casting long shadows on the damp stone. Rats scurry near the bread stalls. The smell of the day settles into the stones. You make your way toward a boarding house, hoping for a corner of straw and a bit of peace. The door creaks. Inside it's dim and smoky. A woman hands you a mug of ale, warm and cloudy. No one drinks the water, not unless they want to spend the night praying to Saint Dysentery. You sip. It's awful, but it's safe, mostly. You lay back on your straw mattress, itchy and coarse. Someone snores in the next room. A dog barks outside. The scent of the city lingers in your hair, your clothes, your thoughts. And this is only the beginning. You wake to the sound of church bells. Faint and far off, like a memory wrapped in morning fog. The air is cool, heavy with smoke, and the faint tang of chamber pots emptied in the night. Your back aches from the straw bedding. Your skin itches faintly. You stretch, yawn, and remember today you're supposed to bathe. But here's the catch, bathing isn't exactly encouraged. You rise and look around. The innkeeper's daughter is wiping down the common room tables with a cloth so grimy it could grow legs. No soap in sight, just water from the rain barrel out back. You nod politely and step into the street where puddles shine like oil, and every stone seems to squelch underfoot. Bathing, you soon realize, is a suspicious activity. In many parts of medieval Europe, to wash your body too often is to invite illness, or worse, judgment. The church, ever present and deeply influential, warns against nakedness as a gateway to sin. Cleanliness for many is more moral than physical. There are bathhouses, sure, but you're warned that those are dens of iniquity. Places where hot water meets hot gossip, and not just gossip if you catch the drift. You hear a joke that goes, he went to the bathhouse to clean his body and dirty his soul. It's whispered with a smirk. Still, curiosity pulls you in. You follow a side street to a low timbered building, steam rising lazily from its tiled roof. The bathhouse. Inside, it's a strange blend of comfort and caution. A large wooden tub sits in the center, filled with cloudy water that smells faintly of rosemary and feet. Around it, half-dressed figures lounge on benches. One man scrubs behind his ears with what looks like a rough cloth dipped in ash and herbs. Another is being shaved with a straight razor, a towel around his neck, eyes closed like he's praying. You're offered a turn in the tub. Politely, you decline. The bath water isn't changed often. It's communal. One person after another sinks in wealth permitting, of course, and while some bathhouses boast hot stones and scented oils, others are glorified soup pots of human broth. You eye the floating bits. Are those toenails? Historians still argue whether bathing was really rare or just underreported. Some regions, especially under Islamic influence, were much cleaner than the rest of Europe. In southern cities like Cordoba or Palermo, you could find flowing fountains, perfumed baths, and tile mosaics that glowed in candlelight. But you're not there. You're in the north, where the climate is colder and suspicions run hotter. Outside again, you overhear a conversation between two women. They whisper about a noblewoman who bathes every week. The horror in their voices is palpable. Her blood must be thinned, one whispers. She'll catch the chill and die, just you wait. You walk past a monk reading aloud from a thick leather-bound book. He pauses to scratch his beard and mutters something about vanity and the sins of the flesh. Clean skin, he implies, tempts clean thoughts to stray. Better to remain modest. Better to keep the dirt. You can't help but reflect on how strange it all seems. In your own time, cleanliness is linked to virtue. Brushing your teeth, washing your hands, bathing daily, these are second nature. But here, the logic is reversed. Soap is suspect. Baths are a risk. You think twice before touching your face. In some towns, people use steam baths instead. You watch peasants gather in small stone buildings, pouring water over hot rocks, sitting in thick mist. It's more about warmth than washing. Afterward, they beat each other with birch twigs to stimulate circulation. You try not to laugh, it feels like a wellness spa run by medieval lumberjacks. You follow a trail of smoke to a merchant selling bundles of dried lavender and yarrow. For your bath, he winks. If you dare, you buy a sachet anyway. The smell is sharp floral, a little spicy. You hold it under your nose and feel momentarily protected. Further down the street, you spot a wooden sign swaying over a doorway soap maker. You step inside and are greeted by a cloud of live fat and burnt herbs. The woman behind the counter is stirring a large pot, her hands red and raw. You want it scented or strong, she asks. You don't get both. Soap here is rare and expensive. Made from animal fat and lye, it's as much a tool as it is a luxury. The wealthy might own carved bars scented with rose or lemon. The poor make do with ash sand or nothing. And remember, this soap isn't gentle. It stings the eyes, burns cuts, and leaves your skin feeling tight as leather. You thank her and step out clutching a crumbly chunk that smells faintly of tallow and thyme. Not everyone shares your interest in cleanliness. As you walk, you see a man relieving himself in an alley completely unbothered. A small boy, barefoot and shirtless, plays beside a pile of horse dung. A group of laborers, sweat-soaked and soot-covered, sit on a bench laughing as they eat bread and onions with unwashed hands. It's normal, expected. No one flinches. You pass a churchyard where a public fountain trickles from a carved lion's mouth. A woman is washing her baby in it, cooing gently. The water sparkles just a little. It's one of the few safe places to bathe, at least in public view. But even this is frowned upon. A priest stands nearby, arms crossed, watching silently. You're reminded again, in many towns water is dangerous. Stagnant ponds breed disease. Wells are often contaminated. Rainwater is best if you can collect it. Otherwise you risk what they call a trembling fever that arrives suddenly and leaves people ghost pale and shaking. The wise avoid water entirely, which is why beer is safer. Ale, watered wine, even mead, these are drunk by children and elders alike. The alcohol kills bacteria that no one yet understands. You sip a warm mug in a tavern later and think grimly that this is their version of filtered water. The room smells like sweat, roasted meat, and old smoke. You notice a man in the corner with remarkably clean hands, nails trimmed and skin pale. You ask him how he manages it. He grins and says, "I don't work." Fair enough. You find your way back to your lodging just as a drizzle begins. The rain cuts through the filth in the street, creating rivulets of brown water that wind like veins through the city's stone heart. You pause beneath an overhang and breathe in the scent, earth, soot, wet wood. For a moment it almost smells fresh, but then a bucket tips over somewhere above you. You don't wait to see what it contains. As you close your eyes that night, wrapped in scratchy blankets and the ever-present scent of humanity, you wonder if people in this time ever noticed the smell. Or did they, like the tanners and the soap makers, simply stop smelling it at all? You wake before dawn, your nose still full of damp wool and smoke. Carefully, you step over the sleeping forms huddled around the hearth. The inn is quiet. Only the soft crackle of embers and someone snoring rough and uneven like a saw cutting wet wood. You nudge open the door and slip outside into the misty street. Here the air smells better before the latrines overflow and the market awakens. A dung cart rolls slowly past its driver, humming off key. He flicks the reins with one hand while covering his nose with the other. You consider doing the same. Today, you're on a curious journey to discover what people did instead of bathing, how they faked cleanliness in a world where water could kill soap, could sting, and hygiene was often just an illusion. You begin with your teeth, or rather the lack of care they receive here. Toothbrushes don't exist. Instead, some chew on twigs, especially from aromatic trees like willow or hazel. You try it yourself, gnawing the end into bristles and gently scrubbing. It tastes woody, slightly bitter, but better than nothing at all. Nearby, a woman swishes something in her mouth. When you ask, she grins, teeth surprisingly white. "Vinegar and mint," she says proudly. Keeps the rot at bay. You raise your eyebrows impressed. Not bad, you admit. Still, most people don't bother much. Teeth rot, fall out and blacken with age. Dentistry. That's a barber's job. Barbers who also handle surgeries, bloodletting, and if you're unlucky, amputations. Later, you spot one outside his shop, a red and white pole spinning slowly. A child sits on a stool while the barber sharpens a hooked tool. You decide not to look too closely. Historians still argue, was tooth decay worse back then? Or just different? Sugar was rare, yes, but bread made from stone ground flour often held tiny grit, wearing teeth down like sandpaper. You run your tongue over your molars, suddenly grateful for soft bagels and modern dentistry. Next, your hair. You duck inside a wooden building marked with a faded comb. It's a barber surgeon's shop, but today more combing than cutting. A woman sits on a stool, hair thick and dark, while the man slowly drags a fine-toothed iron comb through her curls. Fleas scatter like sparks. He dips the comb in a bowl of vinegar and ash. Delousing is routine. Everyone should do it. Lice and fleas are part of daily life. Children scratch their heads constantly, and adults wear linen caps to keep the critters at bay. You suspect you've picked up some yourself. People powder their hair with crushed herbs or scented earth. Some wrap it in cloth overnight to keep it tidy. Hats are essential, hiding greasy roots, warding off lice, at least in theory. You buy one wide-brimmed woolen, slightly itchy. It makes you look important, or at least less dirty. Clothing is another trick. Most people own only one or two outfits. The wealthy might have several, but for common folk, changing clothes is a luxury. Washing them, an ordeal. You watch a washerwoman by the river, slapping linen against a flat rock, her baby asleep in a basket nearby. The water is brown, the soap homemade, the smell aggressive. Still, people get clever. To appear clean, they layer fresh linen under outer garments. Linen soaks up sweat and oils, so it's the first thing washed. That's why noblewomen's portraits show so much white at collars and wrists, a secret handshake of hygiene, signaling status and care. You begin to notice it more and more. At a spice merchant's stall, you rub your hands with rosemary leaves and lemon peel. The scent is sharp, crisp, masking the rest of you. It doesn't last long, but for a brief moment you feel civilized. Perfume plays a massive role in this illusion. You wander into an apothecary, a dim herb-scented shop, dried flowers hanging like upside-down bouquets. The woman behind the counter offers you hungry water rosemary steeped in alcohol. To cleanse the spirit and the body, she says with a wink. You dab it behind your ears. It stings, but smells heavenly. In wealthier cities, perfumers are artists. They mix musk, rose clove, and amber into oils and waters. Scent becomes armor, cloaking the stench beneath. Royal courts reek of floral cover-ups. You learn Queen Elizabeth, I used rose petal vinegar on her skin to ward off infection, and probably the smell of courtiers who hadn't bathed in weeks. You hear of pomanders, small decorative balls filled with fragrant herbs and spices worn around a neck or on belts. One merchant offers you a wooden one packed with cloves and cinnamon. To hold near your nose in crowded places, he says. You don't need convincing. Passing through a crowded market, you hold your pomander close. The mingled scent of onions, leather, and sweat overwhelms you. You feel like you're swimming in soup. Breathing deeply, pomander in hand, you survive. But the real battlefield is your feet. You quickly learn to avoid puddles, not just because of the muck, but because they're full of more than water. Chamber pots are emptied into the streets, and though laws exist, enforcement is lax. The classic cry, gardes low. Watch out for the water is often your only warning before a splash from above. Shoes help if you can afford good ones. Most wear rough leather with wooden soles, but these don't always protect against the slime. You buy a pair of Patton's wooden platforms strapped to your shoes, raising you above the muck. They clack as you walk, making you feel like a proud, awkward stork. Back in your room, you try a dry wash, rubbing your body down with a linen cloth, scrubbing your scalp with ash and rosemary, dusting underarms with ground mint, and applying perfume like armor. You feel less like a weary traveler and more like a walking potpourri. You catch your reflection in a polished metal mirror, not glass. Tired eyes, flushed cheeks, hair flattened beneath your wool hat, and a surprising sense of accomplishment. You've survived another day, looking almost clean in a world where cleanliness is mostly illusion. Before bed, the town crier's voice echoes, calling out an upcoming holy day. You think of public penance, fasting, confession. Then you realize maybe cleanliness really is closer to godliness, just not in the way you expected. It's not about soap or water, but how you are seen, how you present yourself, how you carry the grime. You lie down on your lumpy straw mattress, still itching slightly, and close your eyes. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks, a rat scurries, and a bucket sloshes. You smile softly, clean enough for medieval standards. You wake before the bells, the air in your little chamber, thick with the scent of damp wool, smoked meat, and the ever-present undercurrent of mildew. A rooster crows somewhere beyond a wooden shutter. Today you're on a new mission: food. Not just to eat it, but to understand how people in the Middle Ages fed themselves, what they ate when, and what those meals said about their lives. You wrap your cloak tighter and step into the waking town. The sky is still a soft grey with the faintest trace of morning pink slipping over the rooftops. Smoke curls from chimneys as hearths are rekindled. A woman in a heavy skirt and apron carries a basket of loaves, warm and fragrant. You follow your nose. The first thing you notice is that food is both everywhere and nowhere. The marketplace bustles, sacks of onions, baskets of eggs, barrels of dried fish, wheels of cheese. But most people aren't shopping, they're trading. Coins are rare among the commoners. Goods, favors, and services speak louder than silver. You ask what's for breakfast, and a boy offers you a chunk of coarse bread, still warm, and a cup of something brown and watery. Ale, he says proudly. Small ale, won't knock you over. And indeed, it's barely fermented with a taste more like bitter barley tea than beer. But it's safe, cleaner than the water, and surprisingly filling. Bread is the cornerstone of life here. Not the fluffy golden loaves you know, but dark dense rounds of rye barley or oats. White bread is rare, a symbol of wealth. The commoner's bread is gritty, heavy, sometimes sour. You chew slowly, noticing the faint crunch of ground husks and occasionally a grain of sand. A farmer nearby explains that grain is milled by large stones, often poorly maintained, and bits of rock end up in the flour. Over years, this wears down teeth, a quiet, steady erosion of the mouth. You chew more carefully after that. You ask about fruit, and a woman points to a pile of wrinkled apples, soft pears and berries drying on a cloth. For later, she says, stewed with honey, if we're lucky. Most fresh fruits are eaten in season. Otherwise, they're dried, pickled, or stored in straw. You see baskets lined with herbs to keep the insects out. Clever tricks passed down from grandmothers. Meat is a luxury. You pass a butcher's stall where a man is hacking at a pig carcass with a broad, worn cleaver. Sausages hang from the rafters, fat links speckled with herbs and salt. A few chickens scratch in a coop, nearby their fate already sealed. Beef is for the rich. Pork, mutton, and rabbit are more common if you can trap or raise them yourself. Still, most people eat very little meat. It's often reserved for feast days or Sunday stews. Fish is more common, especially in towns near rivers or coasts. You watch a man gutting eels with quick, practiced hands, his apron soaked and his fingers moving like clockwork. You're invited to join a family for their morning meal, a simple affair of bread, onions, and a bowl of pottage, a thick grey-brown stew of grains, roots, and whatever scraps are available. It simmers in a clay pot over the fire, bubbling gently. The taste is earthy, bland, but comforting. Carrots, parsnips, and bits of cabbage float like little treasures. The woman stirs with a wooden spoon and adds a pinch of dried herbs from a pouch. Pepper's dear, she explains, but thyme and sage we grow ourselves. You nod. Spices are imported from distant lands, India, Arabia, even as far as China. They're precious, costly, and guarded like gold. In wealthier households, meals are elaborate affairs. You sneak a look into the manor kitchen through an open door and see servants bustling about. Whole birds stuffed with nuts and fruits. Pastries shaped like animals. Platters glazed with saffron and cinnamon. Feasts are as much about show as taste. The more exotic, the better. You remember hearing that in royal courts, peacocks were roasted, then redressed in their own feathers and served flaming. Not for eating, just for awe. A performance on a silver plate. But for most meals are humble and practical. You watch a man pull a flatbread from the embers, brush off the ash, and slice it with a knife worn to the hilt. He eats it with a smear of soft cheese and a boiled egg still warm in its shell. No plates, no forks. Hands and shared bowls suffice. You ask about sweets, and a girl shyly offers you a honey cake wrapped in cloth. It's dense, chewy, and tastes like flowers. Sugar is rare and expensive. Honey does the work. In monasteries, monks tend hives like treasure vaults, and wax candles are saved for sacred hours. You suck the last crumb of cake from your thumb, smiling. Lunchtime doesn't come with a bell or break. People eat when they can, what they can. Field workers carry onions, cheese, and crusts of bread. Travelers buy meat pies from street vendors, savory, greasy, wrapped in hard pastry that doubles as a plate. One man shows you a pie with a hollow crust stuffed with spiced fish. Keeps it good longer, he says, winking. In some inns, the meal is communal. A long table, shared dishes, loud talk, and elbow room only. You sip more small ale and tuck into another bowl of pottage. This one has barley leeks and the ghost of ham. You learn not to ask what's in it. At dusk, you watch a baker fire his oven, the stone glowing like a sleeping dragon's belly. He shovels flat rounds onto the hot floor, each loaf marked with a simple symbol, a cross, a star, a swirl. Bread is taxed, inspected, and regulated. Poor quality can mean punishment. Good bakers are respected, even protected. You ask if there's such a thing as dinner. He laughs. If you've eaten twice today, you're doing well. You nod humbled. For many, hunger is a companion. The line between enough and too little is thin and often blurred by poor harvests, cold winters, or greedy lords. You hear tales of famine, years when bark was boiled and rats were hunted. Children remember the ache. Old ones speak of it in whispers. Still you see kindness. A woman offers a bowl of porridge to a passing beggar. A monk hands out bread from the abbey gate. A child breaks her apple in half to share with her little brother. Food is survival, yes, but it's also community. Ritual, a small warm defiance against the world's hardness. Back in your room, you sit by the fire with a slice of brown bread, a wedge of sharp cheese, and a mug of ale. You eat slowly, thinking of everything you've seen. No fast food, no instant noodles. Just hands, fire, earth, and time. You curl beneath your blanket, full and thoughtful. The smell of baked onions clings to your tunic, and the quiet hum of distant laughter filters through the shutters. In the Middle Ages, food isn't just fuel, it's a mirror. A glimpse into class belief, hardship, and grace. You close your eyes, stomach warm, and sleep comes like a blanket folded over your heart. The next morning, the wind carries the sharp, unmistakable scent of animals. You follow it down a narrow lane where hay crunches softly underfoot and flies buzz lazily in the warm morning air. The village stables are awake, and so are their inhabitants. Cows moo quietly. Chickens scratch at the earth. Pigs grunt with greedy noses. This is not a petting zoo, this is your new reality. You lean on a weathered fence post and watch as a boy tries to tug a stubborn goat away from chewing on his tunic. The goat wins. In medieval life, animals are not companions, they are livelihood. Every cluck, every moo, every bleat is tied to survival. A chicken means eggs, feathers, and stew. A cow brings milk, manure, and eventually meat. Even the humble sheep gives wool for the cold winter. But with them comes the stink, the noise, and the ever-present risk of disease. You notice something: animals aren't kept far from people. They're right here, in the yard, on the street, and yes, sometimes even inside homes. A woman sweeping her doorstep tells you plainly, in winter the pigs sleep with us, keeps the cold out. She says it as if mentioning an extra blanket. You try to imagine curling up next to a squealing sow, the floor thick with straw, and suddenly your own mattress feels like royal velvet. The idea of hygiene as you understand it simply doesn't apply here. Waste, both animal and human, is everywhere. It soaks into the earth, clings to worn boots, and trickles down the cobbled streets with every rainfall. Chickens perch freely on rafters, their droppings falling like unpleasant little surprises. You pass a stable where a man mucks out stalls, shoveling manure with a steady rhythm. He's done this so long the smell doesn't even register anymore. You try breathing through your mouth, but it doesn't help. Still, you have to admit there's an odd kind of order in the mess. Dung is collected and piled for compost. Pig slop is a carefully stirred brew of scraps, whey, and water. Nothing is wasted. Even fleas and lice have their place, though you'd rather they didn't. Inside one cottage, a girl braids her hair while a dog sleeps beneath the bench. A cat jumps onto the table, scattering onion peels. No one shoos it away. Cats, after all, are prized for killing rats. And where there's grain, there are rats. Always. You hear a story in the tavern about a rat the size of a loaf of bread. Probably exaggerated, but maybe not. Grain stores are rat heaven, warm, dark, and filled with food. People store their wheat in elevated barns, hang smoked meats from beams, and trap rodents with spring-loaded devices that seem both cruel and ingenious. One older man tells you how, as a boy, he once found a snake in the flour sack drawn by the mice. We took it as a blessing, he says, grinning with a toothless smile. It stayed for a month. Your stomach turns just a little. Animals serve another purpose too: transport. You watch oxen pull a heavy cart of stones through the village square. They move slowly, shoulders, straining hooves grinding into the mud. Horses are more elegant but rarer, and usually reserved for knights or messengers. For most, feet or carts will do. You see a man try to shoe a donkey, coaxing it with soft murmurs. The donkey responds by kicking over a bucket. You wince. In monasteries and noble estates, you find cleaner stables, better fed animals, and more refined breeding. Hunting dogs are sleek and alert. Falconers train birds of prey to catch rabbits or pheasants. These creatures are status symbols, tools of the elite. But even here, the barns smell the same. Rich or poor, straw and sweat don't discriminate. A friar explains the deeper meaning. Animals are part of God's order, he says gently. They serve us, and in return we must tend them with care. His tone is kind, but your attention drifts as a rooster hops onto his windowsill and crows directly into the room. The friar flinches, then chuckles. That one perhaps is testing me. You begin to notice patterns. Pigs roam freely, in some towns their ears notched for ownership. Dogs sleep in doorways. Geese act like security guards hissing at strangers. A donkey pulls a spinning wheel on a circular track all day long, grinding olives for oil. You pass by a tanner's shop, instantly regretting it. The stench is indescribable. Hides soak in vats of urine lime and dog droppings. Yes, dog droppings. The process softens the leather. You try not to gag. The tanner, cheerful, despite the fumes, waves at you with blackened fingernails. Want to try scraping a hide, he calls out. You politely decline and move on at a brisk pace. It strikes you how closely human life is braided with animal life here. There are no sealed walls, no tiled kitchens, no vacuum-sealed packages. Everything food, warmth, clothing, work depends on these creatures. But this closeness also brings danger. Illness can leap species. Historians still argue whether the Black Death originated from rats, fleas, or even livestock. What's certain is this crowded town's poor sanitation and shared spaces made it spread like wildfire. You shiver at the thought of a flea bite changing your fate. Yet there's resilience. Children climb onto oxen like playgrounds. Shepherds hum to their flocks. A boy ties flowers to a cow's horn and calls her his wife. You laugh, and so does he. In the evening, a small family invites you to help bring in the goats. The animals trot home with familiarity, bells jingling softly around their necks. Inside the cottage, you sip warm milk by the hearth. The goat smells faintly of hay and something sour, but she settles beside you like a cat. It's oddly comforting. They show you how they make cheese, pressing curds into molds, wrapping them in cloth, and setting them on cool shelves. The father beams with pride. This feeds us all winter. You taste a crumbly wedge, sharp, tangy, and deeply satisfying. As the fire crackles, you begin to understand. These people don't separate themselves from nature. They live within it, among creatures that cluck, squeal, and moo. There's no fantasy here, just hard work, shared space, and moments of gentleness. You fall asleep that night, a wool blanket pulled to your chin, and the soft sound of a pig snoring from the next room. And somehow you don't mind. The morning chill greets you like a splash of cold water. As you step outside, the scent of damp earth and firewood smoke drifts gently on the breeze. And then something else. Something rank. A cart creaks by. The answer hits your nose like a slap. It's a night soil collector, yes. Someone whose job is literally to scoop up human waste. You blink hard. He's whistling. You follow him down a rutted street lined with timber-framed homes. Without plumbing, villagers rely on chamber pots, outhouses, or more commonly a simple shout of warning before dumping yesterday's business into the street. A careless footstep here is not just a minor inconvenience, it's a catastrophe for your boots. The man pauses at a corner, lifts a sloshing bucket, and dumps it into a larger barrel strapped to his cart. It's honest work, he says, wiping his hands on a rag that clearly does nothing. You nod, trying to breathe through your mouth again. It doesn't help. Hygiene in medieval times wasn't entirely forgotten. It was just interpreted differently. Public bathhouses once dotted cities and towns across Europe, remnants of Roman sensibility. But over time, concerns about modesty disease and moral decay meant many were shuttered or condemned. You pass a building with faded tiles and wonder if it once held hot water steam, and a brief illusion of cleanliness. Still, people washed, sort of. Hands and faces were rinsed in cold basins. Linen undergarments were changed and scrubbed, absorbing sweat and oils, so outer garments could be worn longer without reeking. The logic checks out in a roundabout way. You visit a washerwoman by the river. She beats sheets against flat stones with the rhythm of a musician. Soap made from animal fat and lye stings the skin. Her hands are cracked and red. She grins and jokes cleaner than a nun's conscience, these sheets. You laugh mostly because you're afraid not to. Water. The Great Purifier is everywhere and nowhere. Wells provide drinking water, but they're often polluted by nearby waste pits. Rivers offer convenience but invite disease. You see people filling buckets upstream while others wash laundry barefoot in the same current just yards away. Downstream, a pig sloshes in happily. You take one cautious sip and immediately reconsider. Monasteries maintain better habits. A friar shows you their latrine trench built over a running stream. Ingenious, in a grim sort of way. He explains that cleanliness is next to godliness, though clean is a relative term. Still, monks wash hands before meals and after using the latrines. You nod impressed until you notice they all use the same communal towel. Hair care, you soon learn, is a battlefield. Fleas and lice are constant companions. Delousing is a daily ritual, often performed with a fine-toothed comb over a basin or a sheet. You see two sisters picking through each other's hair, gossiping and laughing like it's a picnic. A louse is crushed with a sharp snap. Satisfying, disturbing, somehow both. Barbers are more than just hairstylists, they're surgeons, dentists, and general fixers. You step inside a small shop and are greeted by the pungent mix of old blood, strong herbs, and something charitably described as medicinal. The barber invites you to sit sharpening his blades with dramatic flair. You want a bloodletting a tooth out, or just a trim? He asks, grinning. You stammer something about observation and edge away from the leeches on the table. He shrugs and begins shaving another man's head, standard for those seeking to rid themselves of lice. The man winces but says nothing. Better bald than itchy, apparently. You hear whispers about cosmetics and perfumes. Not all avoided them. Among the wealthy, masking odor became an art. Lavender sachets, rose water spritzers, and scented gloves help distract from bodily realities. Some even believed that strong smells like ambergris or musk protected against plague. Miasma, they called it. Bad air caused disease, so smelling good meant staying healthy. Historians still argue whether these beliefs had any real merit. Did perfume stave off sickness, or just mask the stench of inevitable infection? The science was shaky, but the fashion was firm. You pass a noblewoman wearing a dress so layered you wonder if she's hiding a small dog in there. Her perfume wafts past you, roses and vinegar. A maid whispers that her mistress changes her undergarments once a week. It's considered excessive. In the village, a woman boils her linens with ash soap and mint. She adds rosemary for scent. And superstition. She hands you a tiny pouch. Put this under your pillow, she says. Keeps the fever spirits away. You thank her. Later that night, it actually helps you sleep. Toilets, if you can call them, that range from pit latrines to simple wooden seats with holes. In castles, you find garderobes, stone projections over moats or ditches where waste plummets down a chute. Standing near one, you hear the soft trickle of, let's call it gravity in action. A knight passes by chuckling. Don't stand downwind. Public spaces have their hazards. You avoid narrow alleys after witnessing a chamber pot cascade from a second-story window. No warning shout, just splash. You sidestep the scene, heart racing. In cities like Paris and London, you learn some streets were designed with central gutters, open sewers where filth could flow. When it rained, everything flushed downhill. When it didn't, well, let's just say the smell lingered. Despite all this, people still cared. They decorated their homes with herbs and flowers to cover smells. They hung tapestries to block drafts and dust. They swept their thresholds daily. Cleanliness was not absent, it was just defined by different standards, and often by access. You meet a merchant's wife who bathes weekly in a wooden tub filled with warm water steeped in chamomile. Her servant pours water over her shoulders, careful not to splash. It's a luxury, she sighs, but I feel reborn afterward. You glance at your own dusty arms and envy her deeply. Even among the poor, you find pockets of dignity. A boy shows you how to scrub your hands with crushed mint and river sand. It works better than you'd expect. His mother sprinkles vinegar on their table to keep away flies. Good for health, she says. And sour tongues. Still, not everything can be masked. You pass a man whose boots squish with every step. You don't ask. You see a woman airing out a mattress thick with bedbugs. She sighs, picks one off, and flicks it into the fire. Routine. You begin to accept that medieval hygiene is not about being spotless. It's about survival. It's about finding little rituals, herbs, soaps, combs, clean linens, and performing them in a world that often works against you. That night, you fill your own basin with rainwater. You scrub your face, your hands even behind your ears. You pat yourself dry with a coarse cloth and sit by the window feeling a little fresher. The village sleeps around you, and for once the air smells like wood smoke and mint. You breathe it in slowly, gratefully, and settle into bed with your rosemary sachet. And no leeches. You wake up to the unmistakable scent of bread baking in a clay oven. It lures you like a gentle thread, pulling you softly from sleep and out into the busy morning of a medieval town market square. Today your curiosity drifts toward what people ate back then and how they managed to eat it without accidentally poisoning themselves or losing a tooth to stale rye. The market is alive. Chickens dart underfoot. A child chases a runaway carrot. Vendors shout over each other, offering everything from salted fish to wormy apples. A baker waves you over proudly, slicing into a dense loaf of coarse brown bread. The crust is hard enough to knock on. Best you'll taste today, he grins. You bite in and immediately understand why so many peasants had dental issues. Dental hygiene, it turns out, was often handled the hard way by losing teeth. Toothbrushes, as you know them, don't exist yet. Instead, people chew on sticks, rinse with wine or vinegar, and rub crushed herbs or charcoal on their gums. Some even believe that a wolf's tooth worn around the neck can prevent cavities. You see a man wearing one and wonder whether he's more superstitious or just stylish. Your teeth ache already. Back at the baker's stall, you ask about ingredients. Flour, water, a little yeast, and sometimes sawdust, he confesses, makes it stretch. You try not to choke. Still, bread is a staple. Everyone eats it. Rich or poor, you're likely consuming some form of it at every meal. Only the quality varies. Nobles get fine white loaves. Peasants gnaw on dark, gritty rounds. And sometimes that grit includes bits of stone ground in by the millstones. So yes, literal toothbreakers. You stroll past the fishmonger. His table reeks, but he offers a salted herring that could survive the apocalypse. Fish is vital during religious fasting days, which are frequent and strictly enforced. You count over 150 days a year when meat is off the menu. No problem, the vendor winks. We just call whale meat fish. You blink. Clever. You stop at a cook shop, essentially a medieval fast food stand. A bubbling cauldron releases steam scented with onion, garlic, and mystery meat. You order a pottage, a thick stew made of whatever's on hand. Barley beans, turnips, maybe some pork. Or rat. You decide not to ask. As you eat, you watch a noble servant pick through a basket of spices, saffron, cinnamon, cloves. Expensive stuff. Spices aren't just flavor enhancers, they're status symbols. A rich man's pantry smells better than his body. These costly powders also mask the taste of slightly spoiled meat. A few people even claim they protect against disease. Historians still argue whether spiced wine had any real medicinal value or just made you drunk enough to feel better. You linger at a stall where a woman sells cheese, some fresh and soft, others hard and aged enough to double as building material. Cheese is everywhere. It's portable, nutritious, and doesn't require refrigeration, just a cool cellar. Same goes for ale, which you quickly learn is the safest thing to drink. Water, unpredictable. Beer, boiled, fermented, and safer. Even children drink small beer, a low-alcohol version that won't knock them off their feet. You sip some. It tastes earthy, like someone steeped a loaf of bread in lukewarm tea. But it's clean, and that matters. A monk at a traveling cart offers you a medicinal cordial wine steeped with herbs made in the abbey's apothecary. He tells you it aids digestion, clears the mind, and wards off evil humors. You take a polite sip and nearly cough it back up. Licorice and pepper, bold choice. In the manor kitchen of a minor noble, you see the other end of the spectrum. Spitted boars. Whole pies stuffed with layers of meat and fruit. Jelly molds. Even peacock with feathers reattached after roasting for appearance only. You're offered a slice of something unidentifiable but delicious. You're impressed until you remember that food hygiene isn't exactly stellar. You peek behind the scenes. A cook wipes her hands on her apron after gutting a goose, then immediately moves to knead dough. There's a rat in the corner. No one seems surprised. Your stomach clenches. Back in town, the butcher's stall is a sight and smell to behold. Flies hover. Meat hangs in slabs unrefrigerated, aging not by choice, but by circumstance. People trust their noses more than any expiration date. If it smells okay, it's probably edible. Probably. Still, food isn't wasted. Bones are boiled for broth. Scraps fed to pigs or dogs. Stale bread becomes trenches. Edible plates soaked in stew, then either eaten or given to beggars. You see one handed off to a barefoot boy who grins like it's Christmas. Sweet things are rare and coveted. Honey is the go-to sweetener, but expensive. Sugar, when available, is a luxury. You try a small tart made with dried figs and sweetened with apple syrup. It's divine. The cook winks. Don't tell the bishop I use cinnamon. Even with all this variety, people often eat the same thing over and over. Peasants rotate between bread pottage and whatever the garden gives. Malnutrition is common, and the line between hungry and starving is dangerously thin. A bad harvest can mean death. You pass a woman boiling nettles for soup. She's not sick, she just can't afford anything else. You try a sip. It tastes green, like desperation. In famine years, people get creative and desperate. Bark is ground into flour. Roots once thought poisonous are carefully prepared. In some places, leather is boiled and chewed for sustenance. You stare at your boots uneasily. Still, there's community in eating. A festival begins at sundown and the whole village gathers. Roasted meat, shared bread, jugs of ale passed around. People laugh, sing, dance. For a moment, hunger doesn't exist. The bonfire crackles and children roast apples on sticks. Someone hands you a skewer. It's not squirrel, he says. You take a bite. It absolutely is. But you smile because for tonight it's warm, there's food, and no one is alone. Even in hardship, meals are moments of joy, of connection, of survival. You lean back against a log belly, full eyes, closing to the rhythm of crackling firewood and distant laughter. Tomorrow might bring stale bread and mystery stew, but tonight is enough. You stir gently. As the sounds of dawn in the countryside brush softly against your ears, roosters crow in an uneven chorus. Hooves clop slowly down a muddy path, and somewhere nearby, the quiet rustle of someone sweeping a dirt floor. You're no longer in the bustling market or the grand feasting halls. Now you're tucked into the rhythms of rural peasant life, where food grows only if the land allows it, and survival is an intimate dance with the soil beneath your feet. You step outside, and squint into a low-hanging mist that clings to the fields like a delicate veil. The earth is wet from overnight rain. A farmer passes by, pulling a heavy wooden plow hitched to a patient ox. He nods at you, his face already streaked with sweat and dirt. Fields won't wait, he mutters. Here time is measured not by hours, but by seasons, when to sow, when to harvest, and when to hope the hail skips your patch of barley. You join the family in the field. It's not glamorous work, it's backbreaking, repetitive, and filthy. Yet there's a quiet grace to it, how the hands know what to do, how the body remembers, even as the mind drifts. A boy beside you tosses handfuls of seeds with surprising precision. He grins. I'm aiming for the straight rows this year. His father chuckles from the next plot. Better than last year's zigzags. They show you the tools. A heavy wooden plow, clumsy but essential. A hand scythe with a blade dulled by decades. Baskets patched with bits of cloth. And hope. Every item is repaired, reused, repurposed. Nothing is wasted because nothing is easy to come by. Lunch is taken under a willow tree, brown bread, a wedge of cheese, and an apple that's more bruises than fruit. You eat in silence like everyone else, because energy is better saved for swinging the hoe than telling stories. Still, the conversation drifts. The old woman beside you recalls a year of strange snow in June that ruined the rye crop. We ate nettle soup for a month, she says. Not bad if you add wild garlic. Burns the tongue though. Her grandson adds, last summer the monk said we should pray harder. Said the weather was God's punishment. He shrugs. I think God's just got a poor sense of timing. Historians still argue whether religious interpretations of climate, especially during the so-called Little Ice Age, delayed rational agricultural innovation, or provided necessary hope during catastrophe. But for the people who lived it, survival wasn't theoretical. It was digging up frozen turnips in November and pretending it tasted like feast day fare. You ask about crop choices. Barley and rye are favorites, sturdy, dependable. Wheat is a luxury. Peasants rotate crops to rest the soil. But the science behind it isn't fully understood. It's more tradition passed down than formal knowledge. What grows, grows. What doesn't, doesn't. You help gather bundles of flax, then learn it's not just food that they cultivate. Flax becomes thread. Thread becomes linen. Linen becomes shirts, sheets, bandages, and in poor times, shrouds. At the edge of the village, a group of women sits in a circle spinning wool. Their hands move rhythmically, as if weaving spells. One looks up and says, "We say the thread remembers the mood of the spinner, so don't spin angry." You wonder what a vengeful shirt might feel like. Later, a man invites you to see his bee skeps. "My girls," he says fondly, gesturing to the humming domes. "Beekeeping is delicate work, more whisper than command. Honey is precious. Not just a sweet treat, but a wound dressing a preservative, even a form of currency in some regions." You stand still as a cloud of bees dances past your ear. Somehow, it feels like peace. In the nearby woods, foraging is its own kind of treasure hunt. Children gather mushrooms, herbs, wild berries. You spot a girl inspecting leaves with the focus of a surgeon. "Not this one," she murmurs. "That's the sleeping kind." You don't ask what sleeping kind means. You're afraid of the answer. Evenings are quieter here. You sit with a family as they mend tools, patch clothes, and whisper stories over a low fire. The father shows you a carved charm, a small wooden wheat stalk. "Keeps the harvest honest," he says. You smile, because the idea of honest crops somehow feels more believable than honest tax collectors. Speaking of taxes, you learn soon enough that even peasants must part with a share of their harvest. Some goes to the local lord, some to the church, some to roaming taxmen who appear like bad weather and vanish just as quickly, but not without their due. 3 sacks this year, one man grumbles, dragging his feet through the mud. "And none of it to feed my kids." It's a bitter truth. They till the land, but rarely own it. Laborers by trade and inheritance. You help stack hay bales in the barn, arms aching. Later, your reward is a warm bowl of lentils and a slice of onion bread. Someone plays a fiddle, another hums. A baby babbles in her mother's arms, soothed by the motion of rocking and the comfort of being wrapped in a blanket sewn from dozens of scraps. Nothing matches, yet it's the warmest thing you've seen all day. A boy asks you to tell a story. You offer one about a village in the clouds where the rain tastes like honey, and the cows wear hats. He laughs until he hiccups. A rooster crows again, it never seems to stop. The moon rises and the fields stretch into quiet shadows. You feel it now, the rhythm, the pulse of life when there's no electricity, no screens, no rushing. Just breath, work, and the small kindnesses that hold everything together. The wind carries the scent of hay and half smoke. You lie back on a woven mat stuffed with straw. It pokes a little, but it's not uncomfortable. A dog curls at your feet. A lullaby drifts from somewhere, a grandmother humming to the fire, or maybe to the stars. You don't dream of kings or knights or dragons. You dream of dirt under your nails, a good harvest, and a morning without frost. Because here, that's everything. You awaken to the sound of bells distant, echoing through the morning fog like a call from some ancient place. They toll not to mark the hour, but to summon. It's Sunday. The entire village is already in motion, putting on their best, if still patchy tunics and cloaks, fastening wooden buttons with care, and wiping dirt from boots that never truly come clean. You follow the slow procession to the local church, the only stone building in miles aside from the Lord's Manor. It looms like a guardian over the valley, its spire stretching toward heaven with quiet insistence. Even if the weather destroys your thatch roof, or sickness knocks on your door, the church endures. You pass under the archway and into the chill of the nave. Candles flicker, the air smells of old wood, melting wax, and incense thick enough to taste. Inside, everyone stands. There are no pews, not yet. You stand too squeezed between a group of boys whispering Latin syllables they only half understand, and a woman clutching her rosary like it's her last defense. The priest begins to chant. His voice is low even and hypnotic. You let it wash over you. Not quite understanding the words, but catching their rhythm, their weight. And just like that, you're immersed in medieval religion, not just a belief system, but the backbone of daily life. The church is everywhere. It tells you when to fast, when to feast, when to bury the dead, and how to name the living. It gives you the calendar, the moral compass, and if you're lucky, some degree of comfort. Faith isn't private here. It's public, persistent, and often political. You watch as a farmer drops a coin into the collection box. It might be his only spare this month, but refusing to give is unthinkable. Tithing, giving a tenth of your income or harvest, is mandatory, not just a suggestion. You begin to understand why the church roof is slate and yours is straw. But even within this spiritual structure, cracks exist. You overhear a pair of young women whispering about a nearby nun who tends to the sick with herbs the church frowns upon. She says the plants speak to her, one giggles. The priest says she's a step away from the stake. And suddenly you remember this is a time when religious suspicion can carry fatal weight. Healing and heresy walk a fine line. Historians still argue whether women in religious roles, nuns, midwives, herbalists, had more freedom than secular women, or simply traded one cage for another. Outside, a friar approaches you. Unlike the parish priest, he doesn't serve one village. He walks from town to town, barefoot robe, dusty preaching, begging, sharing news and stories. He speaks kindly, asking if you've confessed. You nod vaguely. He smiles. Well then, the world's still heavy, but your soul is light. Later that day, you follow the villagers to a small field near the church. It's St. John's Eve, and a bonfire is being built. People toss dried herbs into the flames, time for protection, rosemary for memory. Someone throws in a pair of shoes to chase away bad spirits, they say. Whether this is religion or tradition, no one seems to care. It all blends together now, church and custom prayer and play. At the edge of the crowd, a traveling relic seller lays out his wares. A piece of St. Sebastian's robe, a bone from a martyr, a thorn from the crown. You raise a skeptical brow, but he winks. Guaranteed to keep boils away. Relics, real or otherwise, are hot commodities. Pilgrims travel hundreds of miles to touch them, to pray near them, to believe. You meet such a pilgrim the next day. She's older than she looks, sunburned and footsore, but radiant with purpose. I'm going to Canterbury, she says proudly. St. Thomas will hear me. She's walked for weeks, carries everything she owns in a bundle. My son's been ill, she adds quietly. This is my prayer on legs. You don't know what to say, so you offer her bread. That night you sleep in the corner of a cottage where an elderly couple hosts a prayer circle. They chant in soft voices, lifting candles toward icons on the wall. Not everyone can read, but pictures of saints, crucifixes, and colored glass windows become the people's library of faith. You think about how faith here isn't just belief, it's structure, comfort, fear, and identity. It explains disease, blesses the harvest, curses your enemies, forgives your sins, and promises you that suffering isn't meaningless, just temporary. And yet doubt flickers. One man scoffs at the priest's sermon. He talks of sin while dining on veal. I'd sin for a crust of that. Another tells of a monk caught with a brewer's daughter. Gossip spreads faster than the plague. Still the church persists. It owns land, controls education, mediates disputes, and even shapes war. You pass a group of knights who've taken vows before battle. God wills it, they say. You wonder whether God also willed the bloodshed. The bells ring again at dusk, marking Vespers, the evening prayer. In a nearby monastery, monks line up in perfect rhythm. Chanting begins again, deep, slow, and echoing through stone halls. You sit on a bench and close your eyes. For a moment, the world stills. This is the part of the medieval experience, rarely told the peaceful parts. The moments between labor and loss, when the only sound is human breath, wrapped in ancient prayer. Even if you don't believe, you can feel the hush, the centuries that live in the silence. You glance at the stars peeking through the church windows, imagining all the eyes that have gazed up in the same wonder, praying for rain, or peace, or forgiveness, or maybe just for tomorrow. You wake up to the sound of boots, heavy, deliberate, echoing off stone. The kind of sound that hushes a street before it's even fully awake. You peek through the slats of a shutter and see them, armed men, cloaked in steel and leather, marching with purpose. No enemy in sight, but still they carry themselves like wolves among sheep. Today you're walking into the shadowy corridors of medieval justice, punishment, and law. And spoiler alert, it's not exactly a system you'd want to find yourself on the wrong side of. A boy runs past you, breathless. Someone's been caught, he whispers. They're putting up the pillory. You follow the gathering crowd to the town square. 2 wooden posts, iron shackles, and a platform just high enough to shame someone publicly. This is justice 14th century style. The accused, a thin man with stained hands and a nervous smile, is shoved forward. Stole from the miller, someone says. Or maybe the baker. Someone else shrugs. Or both. It hardly matters. Once you're in the stocks, guilt is assumed. Fair trial. That's a concept still under construction. As the pillory is locked around a man's neck and wrists, the crowd jeers. Someone tosses a turnip, another spits. Public punishment is as much about spectacle as it is about deterrence. You stand back, uneasy, and yet it's not all chaos and cruelty. The medieval legal system, crude as it may be, is evolving. Local lords often oversee justice in their domains, holding court in great halls or open-air gatherings. If you're lucky, you're tried by a jury of your peers. If you're less lucky, your fate might depend on something called trial by ordeal. Yes, ordeal. You've heard whispers about it: plunging your hand into boiling water to retrieve a stone, walking barefoot over hot irons, or being bound and tossed into a river. If you float, you're guilty. If you sink, you're innocent. Not exactly encouraging. Historians still argue whether these trials were symbolic rituals or actual tools for determining truth. But one thing's certain: they weren't gentle. A town official shows you the stocks, the scold's bridle, and the worn cat o' nine tails. Tools of order, he calls them. You ask about prisons. We use them. He nods, but mostly for holding, not punishment. No one stays in a cell long. It's too costly. Justice, it seems, is swift and often brutal. And yet in the background, a slow shift is happening. You visit a scriptorium where clerks labor over parchment, copying new laws codified by monarchs who crave consistency. Royal courts are beginning to outpace feudal lords. The king's word stretches farther, with decrees, seals, and scribes to back it up. A few towns have charters now, with appointed sheriffs, and even early forms of policing. But don't imagine blue uniforms and whistles. The medieval watch is more like a neighborhood night crew armed with clubs, not badges, and often more eager for ale than justice. Still, they patrol the alleys after curfew, watching for thieves, arsonists, or anyone behaving suspiciously, which could include sneezing too much during plague years. Later, a merchant tells you about hue and cry. If someone witnesses a crime, they're legally required to shout and rally others to chase the offender. No shouting, the merchant says, chuckling. You're guilty too. Crime fighting by crowd, participation, very medieval, very messy. You wander through a marketplace and see posted laws nailed to a door written in Latin. Most villagers can't read them. That's no excuse though. Ignorance doesn't protect you when punishment is public and unforgettable. Take the woman you meet next. She was accused of gossiping, yes, gossiping. Said the Reeve's wife smelled like goat cheese, she confesses with a sly smile. For this, she wore the scold's bridle, a metal cage strapped to her head, with a bit of iron that pressed into her tongue. Didn't stop me, she adds proudly. Just gave me something new to talk about. Not all punishments are physical. Some are economic. Fines called amercements are levied for everything from missing church to brewing weak ale. You glance at a brewer stirring a frothy vat. Strong enough to knock over a monk, he grins. No fines today, but money doesn't always equal mercy. You visit a leper house on the outskirts of town, where those with skin diseases or perceived moral impurities are sent not out of compassion, but isolation. They ring bells to signal their presence. Not punishment, they say the warden tells you. But it sure feels like it. And then there's the gallows. You find them on a hill, stark against the sky. Empty today, but ominously prepared. They say the rope's never cold, someone murmurs. Executions are public, meant to remind everyone just how thin the line is between citizen and corpse. You meet a hangman, surprisingly calm and well-dressed. It's a job, he shrugs, better than starving. He explains the technique, where to place the knot, how to measure the drop, how to read a crowd. You learn when to make it quick, and when to let it linger. But even amid this grim theater, you catch glimpses of humanity. A woman placing a flower on the pillory, a child slipping bread to a jailed thief, a monk praying for a condemned man who confessed the night before. It's a harsh world, but not heartless. Back in the square, the man in the stocks is being released. His face is bruised, his pride battered, but he walks away. No record, no label, just memory. In a world without centralized data, punishment lives in the minds of witnesses. The sun dips behind the chapel. Bells toll again, not for judgment this time, but for vespers. You sit by the edge of the square, the stone still warm beneath you. A cat slinks past. Somewhere, someone laughs. You exhale slowly. Justice here is far from blind. It sees everything, sometimes too much, sometimes not enough. It's messy and evolving, and often terrifying. But for all its cruelty, it's also the seed of systems we recognize today. You lie back, arms folded behind your head, and stare at the sky. In another world, another time. You might study law from a book, but here you survive it day by day. You stir before sunrise, your nose already filled with the scent of smoke and livestock. The village is coming alive again, but today you're not headed to the fields or to church or to the stocks. Today you're off to market, and you're about to step into the heart of medieval trade, where every object has a story, and every voice is haggling for a better deal. You follow a stream of carts rumbling along the rutted road, their wooden wheels clacking like a slow drum beat. Chickens flap noisily from their cages. A pig squeals in protest, trying to escape a tightly wound rope. Children skip behind, already eyeing the sweets they hope to beg for. Merchants, peasants, pilgrims, and even pickpockets head the same way toward the market town, where fortunes are made or more often scraped together. As you reach the outskirts, the sights and sounds explode around you. Booths of bright cloth line the square. Baskets overflow with apples and onions. There's the sharp tang of vinegar, the sweetness of honey, and the unmistakable scent of human effort. The sweat, smoke, and soil of thousands of hands trying to make a living. A bell rings from the town hall. The market is officially open. Your first stop is with a tanner. He's hunched leathery in more ways than one, and his stall is surrounded by the stench of animal hides. Fresh from the river, he grins, though judging by the smell, fresh is relative. He shows you a belt thick, dark, and rough to the touch. Will outlast your grandchildren, he promises. Next door, a weaver displays bolts of homespun cloth. Earthy browns and dull greens, colors from natural dyes before exotic hues were common. She lets you run your fingers along the threads. Made with sheep's wool from my own flock, she says. Washed in lye, combed, spun, and woven, all under my roof. You nod, impressed. Everything here is done by hand, and it shows. Money changes hands with clinks and mutters. You notice a curious mix of coins, some with local lords' faces, others from distant realms. A French silver denier, here a Byzantine follis there. Currency isn't always trusted, so some traders resort to barter. You see a potter trade 3 clay mugs for a chicken and a promise. Just don't let the chicken break the mugs, he laughs. Historians still argue whether medieval economies were truly monetized or more reliant on in-kind exchanges, especially in rural markets like this one. You stop to admire a smith at work, hammering out horseshoes with rhythmic precision. Sparks fly. He's got soot on his brow and muscle in every movement. Not just horseshoes, he says, nodding at a wall of tools. Axes, hinges, swords. If it needs metal, I can forge it. His apprentice, barely taller than the anvil, looks up in awe. The craft is his future. Suddenly there's a commotion at a nearby stall. A merchant is arguing with a woman over a sack of flour. He claims she shorted the weight. She swears he's diluted the grain with chaff. A reeve is called part judge, part enforcer. He weighs the sack and inspects the flour, sniffing it like a wine connoisseur. Finally, he nods to the woman. Fair trade. The merchant groans. Justice today leans toward honesty. Markets like this one are lifelines, especially in towns granted official charters. These market rights are a big deal. They mean protection under royal law, a boost to local trade, and sometimes even tax breaks. You learn that fairs, those grander seasonal cousins of the market, can last days or weeks, drawing merchants from as far as Italy or Flanders. You even spot a few foreigners here today, a Moorish spice dealer, a Norman fabric trader, and a mysterious man with a monkey on his shoulder selling exotic seeds. Not all goods are physical. There's a bard near the fountain, strumming a lute and singing tales of Arthur and dragons and doomed lovers. Children sit wide-eyed. Adults nod in rhythm. I trade stories for coppers, he says with a wink. But smiles are free. Another trader offers remedies and potions. Tiny bottles labeled in Latin with questionable contents. Cures, headaches, fevers, melancholy, and marriage, he jokes. You raise an eyebrow. He lowers his voice. Most of it's vinegar and thyme, but belief is half the magic. One booth displays books, not many, just a few handwritten manuscripts bound in leather. A young clerk oversees them, eager to show you a worn psalter and a manual on farming. Copied by candlelight, he beams. Books are luxury items here. You treat them like holy relics. You pause at the food stalls. Meat pies steam in baskets, their flaky crusts filled with mystery. You take a bite. It's edible. Probably. Spiced with cloves or pepper luxuries that hint at distant shores. A cook grins. Good, eh? My cousin smuggled the pepper in from Genoa. Or maybe stole it. Either way, it's spicy. Trade doesn't just bring goods, it brings ideas. You overhear gossip about foreign rulers, strange customs, and even a new mechanical device that counts hours. A clock, they whisper. One that doesn't need a sun. Your ears perk up. That sounds suspiciously modern. But here it's witchcraft and wonder. The church, never far from any gathering, has set up a stall, two selling indulgences, accepting tithes and blessing talismans. God likes a generous heart, the friar says, hand open. You wonder who collects more coins today, him or the monkey man. As the sun climbs higher, the crowd thickens. Thieves begin to circle. A boy bumps into you hands quick. You spin and grab his wrist. He grins. Just testing your reflexes. You let him go. He vanishes into the throng. Before you leave, you visit a cooper selling barrels. He's carving initials into the lid of one. Custom orders, he says proudly, even for nobles. He points to a small emblem burned into the wood. That one's bound for a castle. You run your hand over the smooth rim. In a world of rough edges, this feels almost elegant. By late afternoon, the energy begins to wane. Merchants pack up coins accounted, and gossip is traded like currency. You buy a woolen scarf, rough but warm. The weaver smiles. Made it myself. You'll think of me when the frost comes. You nod. You will. On the way out, you pass a minstrel's troupe. One juggles, one dances, one sings a bawdy tune that earns him a slap from an old woman. You laugh. It's chaotic, vibrant, alive. This isn't just a place to buy and sell, it's the heartbeat of medieval life. Goods, yes, but also stories, struggles, whispers, and dreams. And for a moment you forget the mud, the hardship, the disease. You're just one more soul in the crowd, chasing a better day with whatever's in your hands. You step back onto the road, scarf tucked under your chin, the scent of roast meat still in your nose and coins still warm in your palm. You leave the market behind, scarf tucked warm around your neck, and the distant clamor fading into countryside silence. Your boots crunch through frosted grass. A rook caws overhead. You're headed now toward the edges of society, not geographically, but socially. Because while nobles dine in great halls and traders haggle in bustling squares, there's a different kind of life skimming beneath the surface, the outcasts, the oddballs, and the utterly unclean. The leper's bell jingles before you hear footsteps. It's soft at first, more a warning than a sound. You turn and see him, his robe tattered face, half covered in cloth eyes, heavy with the weight of other people's fear. He walks slowly, giving you time to step aside. And you do. Everyone does. Lepers were both feared and pitied in medieval Europe. The disease, likely a catch-all for various skin conditions, meant not just illness but exile. Lepers were sometimes given special housing at the town's edge, even a chapel, but often they were just cast out. Some took to begging, others joined religious orders that accepted the diseased. The line between compassion and rejection was blurry but always cold. You nod gently as he passes. He doesn't speak, just walks. His bell fades. You move on. Soon you cross a village where the road is sunken from years of cartwheels and the weight of weary feet. A girl stands beside a small hut, scooping water from a shared well. She's barefoot, her shift patched at the elbows. She glances at you and smiles with crooked teeth. You're not from here, she says. You smile back, just passing through. She nods like she's heard that 100 times. Inside the hut, her family stirs. Smoke curls from the hole in the thatch roof. You peek through the open door and see a grandmother curled beside a brazier, muttering prayers. A toddler dozes in a pile of straw. Their lives are threadbare, but not without rhythm. In truth, most people in the Middle Ages lived on the brink of poverty. A bad harvest could spell starvation. A sick ox could mean financial ruin. Peasant was not just a job, it was a reality, one step removed from despair. And still they endured. With humor, faith, and a staggering tolerance for discomfort, you pass a group of men dragging a tree branch from the woods. One's missing 2 fingers, another limps. They wave as you go by. Winter wood, one grunts. Else we freeze. You nod. You felt the cold bite through thin clothes and the knowledge that a fire is all that stands between warmth and death. As you reach the next bend, you hear shouting. A crowd gathers around a man shouting from a barrel. "Repent," he yells. "God will burn the wicked like chaff." His robe is ragged, his hair wild. A self-proclaimed prophet. These characters aren't uncommon men and women who by vision or madness decide they're chosen to speak divine truth. Sometimes they gain followers, sometimes they're ignored. Occasionally they disappear quietly into a dungeon. Historians still argue whether such zealots were products of genuine belief or a symptom of wider social breakdown, you muse to yourself. Probably both. A mother yanks her child away from the shouting man, shaking her head. He's touched, she whispers. Or cursed. You're not sure which one she means, but you keep moving. Behind a crumbling wall, you spot a man carving wood with extraordinary detail. A saint in miniature emerging from the block. You pause to admire it. It's for a chapel, he says. Don't belong there, though. I just carve. His voice is low, gentle. His fingers work with reverence. You compliment the craftsmanship. Can't read or write, he says, but I know how to give a tree soul. That's the thing about the edges, you find beauty too. Maybe even more so than in polished halls or cloistered gardens. The unsung people, the ones with calluses and missing teeth, still create and dream. You meet a washerwoman by the river. Her hands are red and raw from icy water. She beats cloth against stones while humming a tune that might be older than the village. Been here 30 years, she tells you. Seen 7 plagues, 3 lords, and 1 talking goose. You chuckle. A real goose, you ask. Swore it knew Latin, she says, stone-faced. Then she winks. You dry your hands by a cooking fire shared between 2 families. Bread bakes in a crude oven, steam rising from its cracks. A boy hands you a crust. Not poisoned, he grins. Probably. It's dry but hearty. One woman mentions a cunning woman in the woods. A healer. A witch, if you're listening to the priest version. Curiosity leads you down a winding path past briar and bramble until you find a cottage almost consumed by ivy. Smoke curls from its crooked chimney. She opens the door before you knock. Knew you were coming, she says, smiling. You don't ask how. Inside, herbs hang from beams, lavender, wormwood, sage. Bottles line shelves. She offers you tea that tastes like mint and rain. People come when the doctors fail, she says, stirring something thick in a pot. Or when they're too poor for doctors at all. She treats boils with honey fevers, with willow bark, and heartbreak with warm soup and better stories. You glance at a curious object on her shelf, a jar filled with something pale and floating. She notices. Pig's bladder, she explains. Used it to show a priest how the moon affects tides. She smiles. He stopped calling me witch after that. Quirky knowledge like this survives in corners of the world. It's not written down, not debated in universities, but passed from hands to hands, whispered like secrets between the leaves. As night falls again, you find shelter with a group of wandering laborers camped in a barn. They light a small fire and pass around a skin of wine that tastes more like vinegar. You sip. It burns. One of them plays a flute badly. Another tells a joke about a friar, a goose, and a missing sock. It makes no sense, but you laugh anyway. Before sleep takes you, one of them asks where you're headed next. You shrug. Where the road leads. He nods like that's the only answer that makes sense. Stick to the mud paths, he warns. The paved ones lead to trouble. You wrap yourself in a blanket of straw and listen to the soft snoring of strangers. The wind creaks the barn's beams. An owl hoots outside. And you think of all the people who don't make it into history books, the sick, the poor, the strange, and the forgotten. And yet without them, there would be no world at all. Morning greets you with a rooster's grumble and the musky warmth of hay clinging softly to your clothes. You stretch joints stiff and tiptoe between still sleeping bodies sprawled across barn floors and old crumpled sacks. Outside, the sun hangs low and golden, catching frost on the fields like scattered shards of glass. A little girl waves to you from a fence post, her smile missing teeth but full of trust and curiosity. You wave back. Your boots leave soft prints on a narrow path that hugs the outer rim of the village. You pass a tumble-down fence where goats chew stubborn grass. Their shepherd barefoot, all bones, gives you a nod, then returns to humming a slow, untraceable melody. It's one of those tunes that seems to belong to no one and everyone all at once. You hum along as you walk. The day carries you gently toward the cloistered world of the monastery. The monk's walled sanctuary rises out of the landscape like a quiet fortress, stone-grey, ivy-hugged, humming with silence. You knock. A figure appears small and robed with a face so still it seems carved from wax. He doesn't speak, just nods, steps aside, and allows you into their world. Inside, your footsteps fall softly on cold stone floors. The air smells of beeswax, old parchment, and boiled roots. You're handed a thin blanket and guided to a bench by the fire where another monk reads by candlelight. You glance at the page, the script tight and elegant, Latin, of course, flowing like a hymn across the page. You read, he asks softly. You admit not Latin. He smiles. Most people in the Middle Ages couldn't read or write. Literacy was reserved for monks, clergy, and nobles. In a time when information was scarce, and books were precious, monasteries served as quiet vaults of knowledge. They copied text by hand sometimes, without knowing what the words meant, just preserving them like delicate relics. You watch a scribe lean over his work, eyes narrow, tongue peeking between lips in deep focus. Next to him, a boy grinds pigment from lapis lazuli. The dust glows even in this dim space. It will color the Virgin Mary's robe. That shade of blue, more expensive than gold. You're told this quietly, as if sharing a secret scandal. Later, you help in the garden. Humble beds of cabbage leeks, medicinal herbs meticulously ordered. A monk names each plant as he touches it. Fennel to ease the belly, rue for protection. His voice carries the cadence of prayer. You learn monasteries were not just homes for the pious, but hospitals, kitchens, and science labs in disguise. Historians still argue whether monastic medicine advanced public health or merely offered spiritual comfort. He shrugs. Maybe both. You pull weeds in silence, thinking about how many modern cures began in places like this, whispered between stone walls. At midday, you join them for a meal. It's meager lentils, stale bread ale, so weak it tastes like earth, but it's shared with reverence. No one speaks. The only sounds, the scrape of spoons, the rustle of wool robes. One monk reads scripture aloud, voice steady and slow. You don't understand the Latin, but the rhythm is calming, almost hypnotic, like a lullaby from another century. After the meal, they show you the infirmary. It smells of vinegar and sage. The sick lie on clean pallets, tended by monks who touch them with care but not fear. There's a quiet dignity here, a space where pain is acknowledged but not made monstrous. You ask about their rules. The monk smiles faintly. Silence, prayer, labor, and washing your feet once a week if we're lucky. You chuckle, and if not, then you learn humility. One blister at a time. Outside, a bell tolls softly. Vespers, evening prayers. But you're not staying. As you step back onto the road, you carry with you a strange peace, like you've walked through a place outside time. You tug your cloak tighter and move on. Ahead, you reach a crossroads. To your left, a trail into the woods, muddy and uncertain. To your right, a better trodden road leading toward a walled town. You choose the right. Your boots clomp over old Roman stones, cracked and weed-twined. And then you spot it. A bathhouse. Not the marble perfumed kind of ancient Rome, but a creaky timbered building, smoke curling from its eaves. You enter drawn by the rare promise of warmth. Inside it's loud, steamy, smells of sweat and lavender oil. People sit in wooden tubs, some scrubbing, some laughing. A woman dunks a screaming child. A man with no teeth offers you a cloth. 3 pennies if you want soap. 1 if you just want to soak. You pay. The water is warm and vaguely brownish. You try not to think about it. Medieval bathhouses varied wildly. Some were luxurious, others barely more than soup kettles. They were social places too. People bathed in groups, chatted, traded gossip, and sometimes more. You glance at the curtained corner of the room where giggles leak through like steam. A merchant next to you leans over. Came in for the bath, he says, but stayed for the rumors. He tells you the latest: a noble poisoned by his cook, a bishop's beard catching fire during mass, and someone discovering a rat the size of a dog in Paris. You raise an eyebrow. He grins. Might be true. Might be ale. After the bath, you feel oddly refreshed. Your skin prickles with warmth as you step back into the evening air. You walk lighter now, like centuries of filth have been soaked off your soul. You stop at a wayside tavern for the night. The smell of onion stew fills the air. A musician plucks at a lute with more passion than talent. The landlord offers a room above the stables. You take it. Before sleep, you sit by the hearth. Old women speak in whispers near the fire. One mentions a comet. Another curses the rats. A third sighs. At least it's not another famine. The laughter that follows is tired but genuine. You close your eyes. and drift again through stone cloisters and soapy bathhouses, through fields and firesides, all stitched together with sweat and steam and stubborn joy. You wake in a straw-filled loft, the gentle creak of beams above your head and the faint neighing of horses below rock you softly back into waking. The air smells of oats animal warmth and the faintest trace of wood smoke from the kitchen hearth downstairs. You stretch your limbs wrapped in a kind of weary gratitude. For once you aren't itching from fleas or shivering in damp hay. You even dare to think briefly that you might be clean, at least by medieval standards. Stepping outside, you notice something odd. The street smells vaguely sweet. Turns out it's market day. Just ahead, the narrow lanes swell with the kind of organized chaos only a medieval town can provide. Merchants holler prices, chickens scatter underfoot, smoke from roasting chestnuts curls between cries of fresh eel, and woeful winter. You press through the crowd, eyes darting between vibrant fabric rolls, pewter trinkets, and long glistening links of garlic. A boy tries to sell you a rat live and insists it sings if you feed it onions. You politely decline. A woman offers a bundle of herbs guaranteed to keep the Black Death at bay. It smells like vinegar and hope. You duck into a shop where shelves bow under jars and bundles. The apothecary greets you, one eye squinting the other wide, looking to cure something or prevent it. He asks sorting beetles into a tiny drawer. You tell him you're just curious. He chuckles. Aren't we all? He shows you his prized tonic, a syrup made from crushed pearls, honey, and a dash of unicorn horn. You try not to smirk. He doesn't seem offended, just raises a brow and says, well, historians still argue whether powdered unicorn horn was medicine or money laundering. Outside again, you watch a man balancing on a barrel, reciting dirty jokes in verse form. Everyone laughs, even the priest passing by, though he crosses himself after. You pause at a small store selling combs and brushes. From boar bristle, the seller declares. You look down at the brushes, then up at the crowd. That would explain the hair. Medieval hairstyles had little to do with fashion and a lot to do with lice. Combs weren't just tools for vanity, they were frontline defense in the scalp wars. Nearby, two boys pick at each other's heads like monkeys. You give thanks again for your bathhouse adventure. As the sun tilts higher, a bell chimes from the town square. People shuffle in one direction, murmuring. You follow curiosity, pulling at your sleeve. In the center of the square, a wooden stage has been erected. A pageant play, someone says. Others groan. Not the one with the intestines again, mutters an old man. The play begins. It's a biblical story told with wooden puppets, crude costumes, and a generous helping of dramatic groaning. A demon pops out of a trapdoor and whacks a sinner with a pig bladder. Children shriek with laughter. Adults chuckle, then go back to snacking on pies. But there's something deeper here too. These stories were more than entertainment. They were how the illiterate learned scripture, how morality was passed down, how communities remembered who they were. You watch as a weeping Mary cradles a puppet-sized Christ, and for a second silence hushes the crowd. Even in slapstick there's softness. When it ends, people scatter. You linger. The stage smells like sweat, old paint, and sawdust. Later you wander into a nearby church. It's cool inside, echoing. Stained glass windows cast fractured rainbows across the stone floor. A priest lights candles along the altar. You sit quietly in a pew, watching the flame flicker, and feel a strange hush settle over you. Not silence exactly, just an old kind of stillness. A man next to you leans over. Confess something. You blink. Pardon, he grins. I confess that I once stole a pie from the bishop's kitchen. Told God already, but he's not as forgiving as the baker was. You both chuckle. Then he stands, leaving you to the glow. You trace your fingers across the worn grain of the pew, wondering how many hopes, fears, and petty crimes have been whispered here. Churches were more than sacred spaces. They were the heart of the community where announcements were made, deals sealed, even taxes discussed. The wall between sacred and civic was a thin one. By now the sun begins to dip. You step outside and wander along the town's outer wall. The towers stand tall, defensive yes, but also watchful. You peer out over the countryside. In the distance, someone's burning something in a field. Probably manure. Possibly bodies, best not to ask. At the gate, a young man in a leather jerkin stops you. You armed, he asks, half smiling. You show him your empty hands. He shrugs and lets you pass. Just beyond, another crowd gathers. This time not for bread or plays, it's a trial. The accused stands on a crude platform, wrists bound. The charge selling watered ale and claiming it cured gout. You wince. A woman in the crowd yells, "And he sold me soap made of mud." Laughter ripples through the onlookers. The bailiff raises a hand. You'll be dunked in the river. If you float, you're guilty. If you sink, well, good luck. You want to protest. You really do. But no one else seems disturbed. It's just another part of the show. Punishments in the Middle Ages were as much about humiliation as justice. Stocks pillories and public shaming were common. Actual jail rare. You watch as the man is dragged away, sputtering complaints about the soap industry being misunderstood. Back in the market, lanterns are lit. Their warm glow flickers against carts and canvas, transforming everyday grime into golden shimmer. A little girl sings as she skips stones by a fountain. A dog barks somewhere far off. You return to the inn, ducking into the hearth. Lit warmth with a sigh that pulls from your heels. The same bard from yesterday plucks his lute again, still off-key, still smiling like he's playing for royalty. You find your stool. The innkeeper offers you stew again, this time with the promise of more meat than mystery. You eat slowly, savoring the silence between spoonfuls. Across the table, an old woman mutters, "You smell clean. What trouble have you been up to?" You laugh, and as night wraps its arms around crooked rooftops and torchlit lanes, you lean back. The fire warms your knees, and the weight of the day sinks into your bones. Maybe life in the Middle Ages wasn't all mud and misery. Maybe between the grit and the lice and the unicorn horn, there was a strange kind of beauty, too woven into every market cry and puppet play, every steaming bath and whispered confession. You yawn, full belly, warm toes, sleep is near. The chill of dawn seeps through the cracks in the wooden shutters, coaxing you awake with its sharp, insistent fingers. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders and step outside into the muted grey light of morning. The village is still wrapped in sleep's soft embrace, with only a few early risers bustling quietly about their chores. You wander toward the fields where farmers are already at work, their breath steaming in the cool air. The earth smells rich and raw, a mixture of fresh plough and damp moss. You watch as a man digs deep into the soil with a wooden plough pulled by two tired oxen. The rhythm is steady and slow, each pass turning over a chunk of history beneath the turning sky. In medieval times, farming was the backbone of survival. Most people spent their lives tilling soil, planting seeds, and hoping for rain and sun in the right measure. The seasons ruled everything: when to sow, when to reap, when to rest. Life followed the earth's pulse like a quiet lullaby. You stop by a woman kneeling beside a muddy patch, planting tiny seedlings into neat rows. She wipes sweat from her brow and smiles briefly at you. Her hands are cracked and worn, but there's a certain tenderness in how she handles the fragile shoots. "This will feed my children," she says simply. Nearby children chase each other, their laughter cutting through the stillness. One boy trips and falls, scraping his knee. His mother rushes over, dabbing the wound with a cloth soaked in honey. Honey wasn't just for sweetening mead. It was a common medicine prized for its antibacterial properties, long before science explained why. As the sun climbs higher, the village awakens fully. Smoke curls from chimneys, mixing with the scent of baking bread and boiling stew. You watch a blacksmith hammering at glowing iron sparks flying like tiny stars. The clang of metal on metal is rhythmic and reassuring, a heartbeat of medieval life. You're drawn to the village well, where people gather to draw water and share news. The well is old, built from rough stones, and moss its bucket, creaking as it descends and rises. A group of women chat nearby, comparing remedies for coughs and aches. One mentions a magic root said to cure everything from headaches to heartache. You listen, fascinated by how knowledge was passed through stories, songs, and simple acts of care. Medicine wasn't just potions and herbs, it was community and trust. Historians still argue whether medieval folk medicine truly helped or sometimes did more harm. You recall the phrase you've heard often. Either way, it was a lifeline. Your footsteps lead you toward the village church once more. This time, you notice a crowd gathered outside, their faces eager and expectant. Inside, a priest is preparing a ritual you haven't seen yet, a blessing of the harvest. The air is thick with incense, and the congregation hums softly, their voices weaving into the smoke. The priest sprinkles holy water over the gathered baskets, grain, fruits, and vegetables. He intones prayers for fertility and protection, asking for the earth's generosity to continue. You watch as people place coins and trinkets at the altar, small offerings in hopes of goodwill. After the ceremony, you wander into the village square, where a festival has quietly begun. Children run with ribbons, elders tap their feet to the beat of a flute, and food stalls offer treats you'd never imagine eating: fried fish, spiced nuts, honey cakes. You join a group dancing in a circle, their movements clumsy but joyful. Laughter bubbles up inside you, light and freeing. For a moment, the hardships of medieval life, disease, war, feel distant, replaced by shared warmth and celebration. As evening falls, you find a quiet spot by a river, the water reflecting stars like scattered diamonds. The cool breeze carries the scent of wildflowers and distant smoke. You dip your fingers into the flowing current, watching the ripples spread outward, endless and gentle. You think about how people then, just like you now, sought comfort in simple pleasures: the feel of cool water, the sound of music, the light of a fire. Despite all the darkness, they found ways to hold on to hope. You settle on the grassy bank, the night folding around you like a soft blanket. The world feels vast and old, full of stories whispered between stone walls and beneath starry skies. You close your eyes and breathe deeply. Tonight you sleep among the echoes of the past, wrapped in the quiet strength of those who came before. The night's velvet curtain wraps tightly around you as you awaken slowly to the soft, distant crow of a rooster. The village is stirring, gently bathed in the rosy fingers of dawn, reaching over rooftops like a tender hand brushing away sleep. You rise and move quietly through the familiar lanes, now peaceful and empty, save for a few lingering shadows. As you walk, you notice how the stillness seems to hold a fragile kind of magic, a brief pause between yesterday's struggles and the coming day's demands. The world feels close, intimate, as if the centuries have drawn near to whisper their secrets directly into your ear. You stop at the edge of a forest where the trees stand tall and silent, their leaves murmuring softly in the morning breeze. This place too was part of medieval life, both a source of life and mystery. The woods offered wood for warmth and shelter, berries for sustenance, and a quiet refuge for reflection. But they also held fears, wolves, bandits, and legends of spirits lurking just beyond sight. You step lightly on the forest floor, cushioned by fallen leaves and moss. Sunlight filters through the branches, casting dappled patterns that dance with the rhythm of your breath. You think of how people centuries ago might have felt this same gentle light, a small comfort in a world often harsh and uncertain. As you wander deeper, you find a clearing where wildflowers sway, their colors soft and soothing. The scent is delicate lavender thyme and something sweet and untamed. You breathe in slowly, letting the calm settle over your mind like a quiet lullaby. In this moment, you remember the strange, quirky facts from your journey: the crocodile dung sunscreen, the powdered unicorn horn, and the ginger baths of the elite. These oddities speak to a world both foreign and strangely familiar. A world where people tried with the tools they had to make life better, cleaner, safer. Historians still argue about the effectiveness of many medieval hygiene practices. Some believe the rituals were more about social status and superstition than actual cleanliness. Others suggest that despite appearances, some methods were surprisingly effective given the knowledge of the time. The truth as always lies somewhere in between. You sit down on a mossy stone, letting the forest hush envelop you. The gentle rustling of leaves and distant bird calls create a natural symphony that soothes your restless thoughts. You close your eyes and imagine the countless souls who walk these paths before you. Farmers, merchants, children, priests, all seeking the same peace you feel now. Life in medieval times was often brutal and uncertain, but it was also full of moments like this: quiet breaths, gentle touches, the simple act of being alive amidst the noise and hardship. You hold on to that thought as you feel your eyelids grow heavy. Slowly, your breathing deepens, the tension melting away. The stories of dirt, lice, superstition, and soap fade into a gentle whisper, replaced by the soft, steady rhythm of sleep. You are safe here, wrapped in the warmth of history's embrace, cradled by the endless night. Sleep well, dear traveler. Now, as the final words settle softly in your mind, let the pace slow even more. Feel the weight of your body sink deeper into the softness beneath you. Your breath is calm and steady, like the ebb and flow of a quiet sea. The stories you heard tonight of strange customs, hard lives, and hopeful hearts fade gently into the background, like a distant melody carried on the wind. Let your thoughts drift like autumn leaves on a slow-moving stream. There is no rush here, no need to hurry. The world outside pauses to let you rest, wrapped in a cocoon of warm light and quiet peace. Remember, every breath you take is a lullaby from the past, a whisper of gentle care from those who lived long ago. Tonight, you are part of that unbroken chain of souls seeking comfort and rest. So close your eyes with ease. Let the calm wash over you, soothing and deep. Let sleep find you gently as a friend who has been waiting all along. Good night and sweet dreams.